Hello and welcome again to the Skill Work Forum. I'm Tim, joined with my partner Brett. And as always, we gather on this broadcast to talk about industry issues, emerging trends, and really challenges around skilled trades. And a lot of times we focus on manufacturing sector. That's the core of where our business is. And usually about this time of the year, every year that we've been doing this, we like to look forward to the next year. Here we also like to look back retrospectively to see, what can we learn from the past year? And really, we thought we'd take a few minutes to assess some of the trends that we thought we were going to be facing in 2023 and see how we did and see what those trends are doing and maybe see if some of them are going to carry into the next year. So we'll just hit on a couple of those. Brett and I will kind of talk about them a little bit, but some of these weren't a stretch for us to talk about, but it's interesting to see maybe the accelerated pace at some of these changes. And the first one is this evolving workforce. We talked a lot over the last year or 2 years about the boomers are going away as the predominant workforce. And as a matter of fact, the most recent statistics I saw is that right now, millennials have overtaken the boomers as the largest sector in the employment. So 35%. So they think different. And, not only millennials, but now coming up Gen X and Gen Z. So there's just an evolving workforce, and they expect and they're motivated by different things. We've talked about that. That definitely came to fruition. It continues to. The other thing kind of aligned with that, and then Brett, you can speak to a couple, is this idea that we felt like, you've got to more than ever pay attention to culture, the emphasis of that because of an evolving workforce, because they're motivated differently. Benefits, pay, flexibility, things like that, particularly the younger generations. They think about things that our generation just didn't think about as what we need to do in a culture environment. And definitely those things have come to pass. So those two things, I'm batting 1,000. I don't know about the thing. I don't know about yours.
Like you said, the reality of the boomers, we've been talking about it for a couple years, the reality of the number of retiring over the next 5 to 7 years and that shift and how you're going to backfill and all those kinds of things. So like you said, that reality has happened and it's still in the midst of happening. And then like you said, the whole culture, it's I think we did a podcast quite a bit earlier this year, I think it was called The Aliens Among Us, which was focused on the Gen Zs and sounds a little derogatory, but it really isn't. It's just recognizing that they're different.
Yeah.
Not bad, just different. And as employers or people that are trying to fill this skills gap, we have to recognize some of that. And so some of the other stuff that obviously anybody that's been living in 2023 is aware that we dealt with a lot of inflation and recession challenges. I think some people, predicted or projected that we might go deeper into into recession. I would say probably the overall feeling as we head in to the end of 23 here, looking back, is that we've somehow kind of balanced it a little bit, but at the same time, if you're a person who's living paycheck to paycheck, which is the majority of people, maybe not totally, but still, the cost of things have definitely, they've felt it. There's no doubt about it. I mean, I think I've seen anywhere from $250 to $700 a month, just for stuff you gotta have, or you gotta figure out where to cut back on those kinds of things. So, the manufacturing industry, which is kind of where we live the majority of our time. So they've dealt with these pressures kind of all year in the midst of still a lot of demand and a lot of growth and that kind of thing. I think the other thing that we've seen, Tim, I don't know that we necessarily predicted or projected, this, but definitely rates, so cost of money, what we've kind of heard referred to and I've kind of stuck with is this, we've seen in 23 this great rate reset. And so, up until even the beginning of 23, money was pretty much free. Everything from mortgage to borrowing money and all of that drives the economy. And obviously we've seen that, I think, today we set, from a mortgage rate perspective, at about 7.2, which has actually come down a little bit. We got up to about 7.5, and then I think the prime right now is up over 5, and so, which is a big change. We'll talk a little bit about what that's going to look like as we head into 24 here in a minute. But then we've also just seen, we've seen some layoffs for sure, depending on the industry. In our world, augmenting maintenance teams in primarily the consumer product goods space, manufacturing space, we haven't really seen a lot of slowdowns. I don't know if we're going to see some, but we've definitely seen and heard of some layoffs in other spaces.
Yeah, it's a weird dichotomy. You look around everywhere from gas prices to eggs to milk to what have you, vacations, flying. The definite recessionary pressures are there, but yet in this manufacturing space, there's also this jet fuel that's being applied that we'll talk about. It's going to be a 24 thing, the investment and reshoring that's driving a lot of manufacturing. But the thing that exacerbates all that is that the need for workers to be able to drive that. So in some spaces there's been layoffs, but in many others in our sector, they're still looking.
Yep.
And in the face of inflation and recession, normally wages come down, but you can't now because the demand is too high. So the traditional way of thinking about this has kind of caused people to rethink. So it's actually been an opportunity for some sectors to see wages increase. We'll talk about that trend.
Yeah, well. Definitely. Yeah, in 23, and I don't think that trend will change. Definitely wages in our space, the skilled trade space is definitely up. There's no question about it. And so demand is high.
Yeah, so that was one of the things we really predicted would be a big challenge this year, and it definitely has been. A couple of the other things we thought that were going to be a 23 challenge or a need was this continuing investment in advanced technology. We'll talk about that a lot. It just continues to gain steam, this investment in now calling 4IR, smart manufacturing. The latest term is industrial metaverse.
Yep.
Catchphrases that all basically are everything's becoming interconnected and virtual and automated more and more. That trend is going to happen. We talked about this thing of AI and what we're going to do in manufacturing. Did it really apply in the space? We really thought it would. And we're just seeing nothing but that accelerate. Yep. We'll talk about that. And the other thing, Brett, is this whole space we're in, which is staffing and talent management, that there's got to be a new thinking around it.
Yeah, it doesn't change. It continues to be, while we'll talk about some of the studies and what they show and what some executives think as far as technology and the drive of that, but still number one is the ability to attract and retain skilled talent. And it's not just skilled trades. I mean, it's a variety of skilled talent, but the demand for that and how you're going to do it and so forth, and the adoption of augmenting your workforce. We've seen it in what we do and in other companies that do similar things to what we do. I was at PAC Expo back earlier this year and had conversations with a variety of people there that were either doing something in this, but the demand, and the ways to find the talent. I think people are, 5 years ago, 6 years ago, we believed it would happen. And I guess if we're now kind of seeing it in reality, that people are recognizing, they've got to change their way of thinking if you're going to get the talent that you need.
Yeah, we just had a conversation with Allison Graylis, who leads women in manufacturing. Yep. And a big part of this solution is, we got to open our aperture a little bit to attract all different sorts and new employee pool of capable people, including her organization represents women in manufacturing. And that is especially with the advent of technology and, science technology, that the STEM push that's going on in schools, largely, and the numbers are continuing to grow, that women are graduating with that and with those sort of skills. We've got to bring them in. That's another, we got to rethink attracting them and making our workplace welcoming for them to be able to do that. So, so those are kind of what we thought 23 would entail, and largely they have. And so 24, we got to turn the page here and talk a little bit about 24, what we think are going to be the trends and projections that you need to be on the lookout for or embracing? Because in all honesty, it's happening now, and a lot of these are going to continue. But there's a few things we're thinking about that maybe you're not thinking of that you might want to consider as you head into 2024. So what are some of the overarching thoughts before we get into some of the details, Brett?
Yep. Well, I think like we talked a minute ago, just the reality of the manufacturing world in 23, and I think it's only going to continue and probably even accelerate a little bit in 24. So in the midst of economic uncertainty and kind of an ongoing skilled labor shortage and these lingering supply chain issues, and then you can kind of get into some other things that I think is going to be, we'll talk a little bit about it in 24, the net zero emissions, kind of the clean kind of thing. Even with all of that going on, you've got the reality of this manufacturing boom. It just is. In 2023, which will impact 24, 25, 26, because they don't build these big manufacturing facilities, overnight. It takes time. But the investment in construction for manufacturing facilities, we're not talking about hotels or apartments or whatever, in that space was $201 billion in 2023. And that is, I think the study, I think it might have been a Deloitte study, that's a 70% increase, over the previous couple of years, type thing. So the reality of that, which is being driven, a portion of it, a big portion of it, is really being driven off of three things that really are government, and I'm not here to form an opinion whether I agree with all the legislation that they did. The reality is it's going to create this manufacturing boom. It's a space we live in.
Yep.
And so now you got to look at it and deal with it. So there was three pieces of legislation that got passed pretty much all in 23, but the Infrastructure and Jobs Act, the CHIPS Act, which is creating helpful incentives to produce semiconductors, and then the Inflation Reduction Act. All of those, the infrastructure kind of speaks for itself. I think the CHIP does as well. We'll get into that a little bit more on that. But the reshoring of or bringing in here to the U.S. the manufacturing of semiconductors, and then the Inflation Reduction is probably layered into that act, which no comment on the name of it, but it just had a lot of impact in clean energy. And so all of these, whether it's EV plants, electric vehicle plants for batteries, or all these things, the fact is it's a boom, unlike we've seen. I think we heard an economist, Tim, who said that we haven't seen this much manufacturing construction in the U.S. since the 50s. So it's a reality. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And, so I guess pivoting off of that, as we go into the more specific trends to look for, you kind of hit it, that number one that we want to go front and center with is this reshoring initiative. And, anybody listening to this podcast, that's a term you're familiar with. It's, the COVID pandemic just emphasized, it didn't create it, it just revealed that we have a significant risk in this country, and that is we were depending far too much on offshore supply chain to critical parts of our infrastructure. And it became very obvious when certain pharmaceuticals weren't available. You couldn't get certain drugs, people that needed prescriptions. Couldn't get them because they were being done offshore. Yep. I don't know if you remember back in that 2020, 2021, the pictures of all the cargo ships and supply ships setting off of LA, just clogged up. It just started there and went all the way back. And not only just pharmaceuticals, but all kinds of electronics. I'm sure there are people out there that listen to that. It's like, it took me forever to get that car I ordered. Well, it's because most of the car and smart technologies we have, from cell phones to cameras to automobiles to toaster ovens, run with semiconductors. Chips, smart chips. And they were not being created here. As a matter of fact, over 90% of them are created offshore. That generated that that bill, which is essentially, the government called it investing, and that is they're spending our tax dollars for that. But they're spending it, one would argue, in a good way, in that they recognize that that is a risk to our country's economic stability. So let's bring that back. Let's invest in manufacturing to bring that back here. So the reshoring initiative is going to drive the manufacturing boom. That is the first trend that we want to put out there. And we don't have to be Nostradamus to predict that. It's happening, and we just need to be aware of it. So there are those that need to take advantage of it. They see an opportunity. But the other thing is going to just drive a lot of exacerbating of the problems we're seeing, which is, okay, great, you're going to build a manufacturing facility that has advanced technology. Where are you going to find the people that know how to repair, install, integrate, troubleshoot that equipment? So we see that as great, but it's going to, for us, we see it as an opportunity, and that kind of gets into our next one, which is the trends that we're going to continue to see in the gap.
Yeah, no, it's a growing, this manufacturing boom or onshoring is only going to exacerbate the challenge. We're already, even kind of prior, I don't even think some of this was baked into these original numbers, back, for a few years, we've been at this roughly 2 million short, with the belief that you're going to go to 3 million because of the baby boomer retirement and all these things by 2030. I haven't seen any updated numbers, but based off of what we're talking about here, I think it goes higher.
Yep.
And not only does it go higher, but the part that I know we're spending time on is we're trying to understand what exactly do they need? What is the,
what's the skill set?
Yeah. And so I think that's still trying to be figured. And if you're listening to this and you're going, well, I'm not in the semiconductor production, I'm not doing any of that, I'm not doing batteries for, for
pharmaceuticals
Teslas
or whatever.
Yeah. But here's the reality. It's one pool of people. And so if this group starts paying more money to pull that talent, it's coming from somewhere. The pie is only so big, and right now the pie is too small to even deal with what we're trying to deal with. So it's going to affect all of manufacturing.
Yeah.
They're coming to get your people.
Yeah. I mean, and you're going to see there's a thread here, because all of this stuff is connected, as it often is in complex things like the economy and the manufacturing sector. This idea of this growing gap is definitely going to be there. That's not a surprise to anybody, but Brett's point about it's going to be accelerated because more onshoring means more manufacturing, more facilities that need more of those workers. And here's the other thing. If I'm in a sector where I'm getting government incentive, they're giving me money to do this, that gives me a competitive advantage over you to have to spend your money to do that. Yep. So you better recognize that the competition is going to be there, and that gets us into the next thing that we're saying, that this is a reality in 24 and beyond. You've got to come up with more innovative workforce. For those few out there that may still be stuck into, we're just going to, we're going to get over the hump, over COVID, and we'll be able to get, people will come back. There have been some, I believe the bounce for people going back in the workforce, I feel like we've already kind of absorbed that. And it's happening right now, but in 24, the bounce for people coming back to work, I don't think we're going to see a lot more of that. You're going to have to continue to think about your workforce, and the next trend we're talking about is the innovative workforce strategies, including augmenting your workforce by leveraging third-party partners and other avenues to attract and retain your skilled employees. Things we're going to talk about with technology, AI, digital tools, things like that are going to be in the manufacturing space. They're also going to be how you find, attract, retain, and upskill. Those same tools are going to be used in our business. We have got to get ahead of the technology in our business to find, attract, retain, and compete for those. And you're going to have to do it too. There's a lot of other things that I think are going to get a lot of traction, like continuing to invest in upskilling and training, digital training environments, on-site, company-funded, rewarding people for taking a next level certification. You've got to invest in your people. Not only is it necessary for skills, but we know the generation that's up and coming, they value that. They value learning and a company investing in them. So you got to do it in two sectors. Number one, you got to have the skill. Number two, your employees that are looking for places to work where people invest in them. So a couple of other ideas is this, a lot of companies are, because we lost a lot of baby boomers and accelerated over COVID, they're doing these alumni programs where they're tapping into their retirees and bringing them back so that the knowledge transfer gets, we're taking advantage of that. Because, I mean, I don't remember the numbers, Brett, but how many baby boomers that were forced into or took retirement during COVID, all of their information went with them.
Yeah.
And so this is a way to try to tap into that.
Yeah, and pull them back in. You can use some potential technology so that maybe they don't have to be on site as much, kind of thing. So I think it's that combination of how do we use the technology and at the same time tap back in to those individuals, because I think roughly the numbers are for every 5 that are leaving, you got 2 coming in. And so how do we get a few of those 5 to work a little bit longer? And is there a way to do it without necessarily needing them on site all the time? So obviously utilizing technology, whether it's AR or different wide variety of different things that they can do.
Yeah, if you think about everybody, even those that were technically challenged, during COVID, grandmas, grandpas, aunts, uncles, they learned how to use Zoom because they had to stay connected with people. So that technology is there and it's getting better, and you can tap into those people's experience and skill and knowledge without having them physically be in your environment, and using virtual reality, augmented reality. That's what companies are going to have to lean heavily into. So innovative workforce strategies, that's a trend. The next one we're going to talk about, Brett, is this expansion investment in smart manufacturing.
Yep. So obviously right after, I think, as we said a minute ago, most executives, the most number, and it's been this way for a multitude of years, on finding quality talent, retaining it. But now what you're starting to see, I think that Deloitte study we may refer to a minute ago said 86% of surveyed manufacturing executives believe that smart factory solutions will be the primary drivers of competitiveness in the next 5 years. So this recognition, and Tim, we've talked about it before, if you go back and you look at the Industrial Revolution and some of these things, the speed that this change is happening now, the speed of technology it's crazy how fast it's moving. And so, I look at it a little bit too, being somebody that spent all of my career, in the manufacturing space. And I talk to people too who I think the initial digital transformation, AI, all of this technology, it kind of scares people, to be honest. And I think the reality is in the manufacturing world, because let's be honest, most of the manufacturing, I don't want to paint with too broad of a brush, but a lot of them are not as state-of-the-art as maybe that semiconductor facility that we're talking about, or even other spaces, that are more creative or more...
Yes, look, we got a robot.
Right,
See?
right.
4IR, there's a robot right over there.
Exactly. So, but I do think the piece that manufacturing executives are starting to recognize, and I think where we can feel a little more comfortable too, I say it's kind of the good, the bad, and the ugly of technology. So the good of it is it's really driving efficiency. The reason when they say it's the competitiveness in the next area, if you can't be as efficient, if you can't keep your plant running, if you can't manage your downtime, we talk about it. When technology is driving us from a reactive in the way we manage things to a more of a predictive, and then we'll talk about it. Well, here I will talk about it now. Is this whole idea of the industrial metaverse? So this is now where it sounds scary on the front, but what it's really allowing facilities to do is to go in and basically simulate, through 3D technology and all these things, what this line or what this production facility, how's it going to run? These new facilities that are getting built, they've been done in a twin type, concept. That is some amazing technology, and these companies are tapping into that.
Right. Yeah, I mean, that's a term, industrial metaverse. Metaverse has been used in other domains, mostly technology, but now it's being pulled into manufacturing. And, that idea of a metaverse, it's this 3D virtual, physical, industrial environment. And we've seen it. We've seen some of our clients have it in spades. We've seen it at different, trade shows and things where people are leaning into it. We've seen a lot of this recently. Another survey said manufacturers anticipate that the industrial metaverse could lead to a 12% gain in labor productivity. Now, Brett, you come from manufacturing world. If you tell somebody that you're going to get a 12% gain in productivity and efficiency, I mean, they spend hundreds of thousands of dollars to get a 0.5%.
Oh, yeah. No, it's your 12% in productivity. You're talking about, these are plants that are already, they're producing a lot of product, and they're putting a lot out there. A 12% number is, to put dollars, there's a lot of dollars attached to 1%.
Yeah.
If you can make yourself more efficient, or you can reduce your waste, 1-2%, that's a typical goal of a company. If you can utilize technology to drive this efficiency, then upscale your people, to do that. These are, it's why executives are saying, if you don't get on board, because if your competitor gains even 10% on you, you're done.
Yeah, no doubt. Part of the other things, AI is scary for a lot of people, and I think it's something that you've got to embrace and leverage and understand. Generative AI in areas like training and upskilling, product design, end-to-end product design, not to mention the layout of your facility, aftermarket servicing like OEM equipment, doing it virtually. You've got a digital twin operating. I don't have to send a team, fly away there to your facility. I can do it virtually. I mean, we have it right now in a small way. I got a problem with anything on my desktop computer. We have a company, they don't come in here and work on it. I mean, they remote in. Many of you have probably had that. It's a little weird. You got somebody, all of a sudden your mouse starts moving around, clicking things remotely. That's just a small taste of what we're talking about here, and that can be done. We talked earlier with some of our team about PLC control technician, and understanding ladder logic and being able to program that. It's a high demand thing. And I'm like, in the future, not too distant future, the ability just to speak into and have an intelligent query into a generated AI persona to tell them, I need the line to do this. Mm-hmm. The logic gets written and the line gets changed in real time.
Yep.
And that's what's coming, and that you could see where that's going to help fill a gap, but it's not going to replace it. So the other thing with all this new data is, okay, great, sensors everywhere. Everything's got sensors on it. We collect all the data. Now what do we do with it? People are getting overwhelmed with the amount of data. I've got an example here. Just think about something that's been around for a while, but an oil rig. Like you think about an oil derrick that's offshore. An oil rig, a typical oil rig has more than 80,000 sensors. Everything from temperature, pressure, flow rate, machinery, equipment, staffing, 80,000 sensors. On average, that produces 2 terabytes of data a day, a single oil rig. The same number probably can be applied to a manufacturing facility. 2 terabytes of data every day. So I was like, how much is that? It's like $1 trillion. It's hard to get your head around. Yeah. How much is 2 terabytes? Well, I can tell you this. I looked this up. So the Apollo rocket system, some of us grew up and we're like, wow, the technology. Think about an Apollo rocket that went to the moon. Their advanced guidance system, which was the state-of-the-art technology, had 32 kilobytes of RAM, kilobytes, and 72 kilobytes of memory. This watch that I have on my arm right here has 1 million times more computing power than that. And so you take that to a whole manufacturing facility, the data is just going to be amazing. So you got to be able to figure out a way. How do we get the right data, that we're looking at the right thing? We get overwhelmed with data in our company. Mm-hmm. It's just so much. So that's going to be an increasing challenge that you got to get your head around as we head.
I think it's going to be a challenge and an opportunity. I think, one of the things about all of this technology that we always kind of want to remind, and people say it all the time, the reality is AI, virtual or on a screen or whatever, but it can't reach out and fix anything. So it can tell you what to fix, but somebody's got to fix that. And that's where the jobs are going to be, which is kind of the world that we live in. But I think the other piece of that, Tim, as we look at 24 and beyond and getting back into this a little bit, not back in, but because I don't think it's just in this space, but in that semiconductor production that we were talking about, I think the skilled technicians who can do that and then understand data, understand analytics. I think I read something, or maybe when we spoke with one of the consultants in that space, she referred to just the data analytics, that it'll kind of morph into part of if I'm advising a young lady or a young man in high school today and what space should you go into and that kind of a thing, we've talked about it before. I don't know if I'd want to be a coder, today. 10 years ago, if you could code, write your own check.
Software development.
Yeah, software development, yeah. And today, those are the jobs that are probably a lot of them are probably going to go away. And so, but the ability to work on the automation, understand the automation, and then understanding the data behind it, that person they're going to write their own check.
Yeah, the trend for being safe in this new environment is the ability to have creativity, troubleshooting capability, and the ability to put hands on something to actually do that. So that the space that is a great opportunity are these technicians that work in this new environment. So along with all the great and awesome things that come with technology, there's also a rising risk. That's our next trend.
Yep, I said it's kind of called the good, the bad, and the ugly. That's a shout out to an old Clint Eastwood movie. So depending on when you were born, you're looking up who Clint Eastwood was right now. But although I think he did a recent movie. So the ugly of all of this technology is the rise in the threat and the absolute reality of the cyber attacks and how you're going to manage cybersecurity. Now, companies aren't out there manufacturing companies aren't out there promoting the fact that they've had a cyber attack in the last year. We know it's happening, and companies are getting held at ransom because basically they can come in and basically say, send us some money or we're not going to...
We're going to shut your line down.
Because it's all... the beauty of technology is it's all connected. The beauty of technology, or the downside of that, means somebody else can get into it. When I worked in the manufacturing world and we had a $100,000 slicer that the only thing sophisticated on it was the plug that you plugged into the wall, there wasn't nobody getting in. And so now, with this advanced technology, this cybersecurity risk is just huge. And it's a huge opportunity. It's a space where, you talk about growth and opportunity if you're in that space.
Absolutely. And I found it very interesting that the manufacturing sector is now taken over. Banking and finance is now taken over as the most targeted sector for ransomware. I would not have thought that. I would have said maybe it makes top 10, but it kind of makes sense because while they're rapidly bringing all this technology in, they haven't thought about, and a lot of I came from defense and background, and, that there is huge stressor on that because of classified material. Banking and finance, huge stress. Manufacturing, they're just now waking up to the fact that it's a huge threat, and they're going to continue to see it.
Yeah, I think they're more, like to your point, it's not that there's more money there, it's just easier access.
It's easy target, right?
Yeah.
People that look to mug somebody are not looking for the 6'2" athlete with the muscle shirt on, right? So
that's right. That's why I've never been mugged.
Yeah, well, me either. So that's because I'm fast. I can run fast. So the next one, and we'll kind of wrap up with a few here, dogs and cats, so to speak. Trend that you got to pay attention to. It's a real thing. And again, people in our boomer generation, they kind of scoff at this, the manufacturing space. But to your own detriment, if you do, green initiatives, renewable energy, carbon neutrality, these are things that are absolutely going to be pivotal. 20% of the world's carbon emissions come from manufacturing, and manufacturing facilities use or consume over half of the energy sources. So you got a big fat bullseye on you if you're in the manufacturing space. And while you may not see it as driving the bottom line, your consumers do. and the growing consumer base and the new employees that are coming in, it matters to them. So if it matters to your customers, I don't care what business you're in, it matters to your customers, better matter to you, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think I referred to at the beginning, some of the headwinds, and one of those is this. Companies have made these commitments to, what they call net zero emissions, to so clean type of thing. And like you said, for the older generation is like, what? Kind of a thing.
I don't buy carbon, I don't global warming, blah, 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 right?
Right. But the reality is as you, in this new generation that you're trying to hire, they actually want to know what you're doing. And companies are committing to that, and it's just one more thing you got to kind of manage.
Yeah, you better, because your consumers and the growing number of consumers are more and more concerned about those sort of things. Makes good business sense, and care about your environment. It's a good thing.
I was in a plant a few weeks ago, Tim, that client of ours. Well, they make a fiberglass type product, and so the amount of equipment and commitment and all the things that were in this facility to basically keep those fibers out of the air for their employees and to keep it from going up that stack to go outside. They had the newest technology of how they would clean the air before it would go out. And I assure you, it was impressive to me as I'm walking through, because I'm looking and going, hey, we're going to put our employees in this plant.
Right, yeah.
And I'd already had questions from a couple of them to go, well, what's it like? I don't want to be breathing that stuff in all day long. And I'm like, no, it's fine. It's super clean.
Yeah.
So you take somebody that's walking through that facility and they see that amount of money that's been spent to do that in that facility, both going out the stack and inside the plant, it matters to them.
It does matter. Yeah, it means you care, and it's going to be a trend that we think. Last one we'll talk about, if you haven't heard this one or looked into it, it really ties in with AI and digital twins, but microfactories is a term that's being spoken of more and more, the advent of microfactories. It's these smaller, highly modular setups that can be very, very agile and be able to take advantage of some of the leading technology like AI and robotics and big data. So there's these hyper autonomous manufacturing facilities that small footprint can produce things quickly, maybe not like mass production, but quickly get something to market and respond to, again, a consumer base that more and more is driven by Amazon. I want it now, and I want it like this. I want it this size, I want it this color. The advent of microfactories is going to be a big thing. I'm curious to see what this does in 24, but we think it's going to be a big thing.
Yeah, it's very unique. It's customizable. If the manufacturing world today, for the most part, you build big plants to make a few items, and they're designed because of the demand.
Henry Ford,
yeah. It's just they produce, and these microfactories will not. So if you're making a product that is, you're feeding half the world on whatever it is.
You make peanut butter.
Yeah, you're not doing that in a microfactory. Yeah. Those things are going to line up and they're going to run a whole bunch, and they're going to put technology in to be more efficient and all those kinds of things. But this concept is going to be, really interesting because, like you said, we live in an Amazon mentality world of I want this, and I want some specialized, customizable thing, and for the most part, you can get it.
Yeah. So, those are our 24 trends that we think are definitely going to have a lot of impact in the manufacturing space, and certainly our space in 24. Curious to see if there are things, and I'm sure there are going to be things that we don't see that are going to happen because things are happening so fast. 24 is an election year. Crazy things can happen. We've got all kinds of chaos going on around the world, and a lot of things can impact, but we do see these things moving forward in 24. So to wrap things up, the overlap of post-pandemic changes with advanced technology, lack of skilled employees, that's driving a ton of these projections. It just is. Those are the big drivers. Economic uncertainty is going to continue on into this year, although we think maybe we've reached our bottom. There's going to be an influx of capital that, Brett, you talked about into this. A lot of manufacturing growth is going to take place. There's going to be a need for innovative staffing and employee retention efforts, big trend for 24, and continuing rapid adoption of smart manufacturing technologies, industrial metaverse type things, micro factories, those are just going to continually to exponentially grow. So I don't know how daring those are, but that's kind of what we think. And we believe that these are the things we're going to be keeping our eye on as we head into 24. So any final thoughts? We wrap this up?
No, like you said, we're not prophets. We really look, we study the space a lot. We look at the space a lot. We look at information, and I think these are trends and people that we talk to and facilities that we're in and things that we read. I think these are trends that we just see. This is where it's heading, kind of a thing. So like you said, it's not, out there, kind of a thing. But it's definitely, I think, as somebody who's running a manufacturing facility or figuring all these things out, I think you've got to be thinking about how's it going to impact and how are we going to manage this.
Yep, absolutely. So hopefully that's helpful to those of you that listen in. We really appreciate the time and effort you spend to listen to any of these, whether it be some of our micro content or the full podcast. We appreciate it very much. As we come to the close of the 23 as we're doing this, we just pray just great blessings upon you and your family and your business, that you have a prosperous 2024 heading into that. And we're grateful for everything you do to join us here, and for the men and women in the manufacturing space and skilled trade in particularly. We're grateful for you. So until next time, have a great day.